Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense. And good morning to you. Welcome to Future Sense now on Bay FM 999. It's with myself, Nick Jeans, and my co-host over the other side there, Steve McDonald. Good morning, Steve.
All the way over the other side here, Nick. Good morning. How are you?
He's actually speaking to us from another dimension, in another galaxy. He's ascended, one could say, or maybe not. I don't know.
I just have an adjustable chair.
Well, we need to have adjustable brains in this time on the planet because clearly things aren't very easy to apprehend with the amount of uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity that exists. And I guess that also applies to the way that we approach how we do things on this planet and how we approach the many challenges that we do have.
Yeah, exactly. Today we're going to have a look at gratitude as a strange attractor. So from a sort of advanced physics perspective, how gratitude can help us create things. And we'll look at what's happening in the world at the current time, as we always do, and make sense of what's up and look at some of the natural patterns and flows and why things are the way they are right now.
And as part of that, and not exactly an opposition to, but the role of criticism and critique for change in the world. And it's a thorny subject. It's hard to actually think about that. It seems like to be critical is a good thing. It's a natural bias in some senses, or some research suggests that we need to be critical in order to survive, that it's important for us. It drives us. It's a driver.
It's a natural dynamic, and particularly at this time as we're exiting the scientific industrial era, it makes a lot of sense that there is a lot of criticism and pushback against the old paradigm going on.
Yes.
So it's absolutely to be expected right now. But the last thing we want to do is be critical of criticism, right? And we'll find out why.
I don't know. I think I wouldn't mind being critical of a criticism, but that's because maybe I'm just too nice a guy and I'm not critical enough. It's a possibility. But you will have some opinions out there. I am sure. We are sure. And you can always text in on our text line 04 373 4119. Make any contribution that you would like. And we are in the position here to be editors. We can be critical of your criticism, so we may not, or we may refer to your texts. But we will be grateful for you for receiving
them. Indeed, always.
You're resonating right now on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans. 9:21 here on Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald through till 11 o'clock this morning. Thanks for joining us, and joining us all around the world possibly, because we are broadcast everywhere. You can hear us streaming bayfm.org, and of course our podcasts go out a couple of days after here, edited via our website. You can tune in there, futuresense.it, that's a portal, or at Future Sense Show, Twitter accounts. You can certainly find us, not too difficult. And please listen back. If you've just joined us recently, in recent weeks, you can go back to earlier editions and get a full spectrum. Well, this morning we're talking a bit about gratitude and a little bit about criticism, two kind of completely opposite approaches of the human being, the way that we are with each other. I'm just thinking about this, and I'm thinking, I wonder how much an animal has gratitude, and certainly I've never seen an animal criticised, but we don't really know, do we?
I don't know about that. If you're maybe a cat.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you're a cat fan. I'm not a big cat fan, I have to say. But we're different there. Yeah, I like dogs.
They're well known for rejecting their dinner.
Yeah, that's true.
Cats.
Yes. So
this is leading towards hacking the change process, essentially, understanding how change unfolds in a more complete way, and moving towards what is a second tier consciousness approach to working with change. And but I guess one of the key differences in the second tier approach is that it no longer fights against things in the change process. Whereas in the first tier, as we've evolved right through to even this emerging paradigm, this relativistic postmodern paradigm, is still in the first tier zone, and it still tends to want to fight, even though it's not fighting physically at this point. We're evolving beyond physical violence, but there's still a lot of emotional violence and a lot of flat opposition to the way things have been.
And understandably so, of course.
Of course, it's absolutely natural. So this is not a criticism at all. It's just simply pointing to what is. And when we're at that stage, when we're moving out of the scientific industrial era, as we are right now, and we're becoming more emotionally sensitive, more drawn to connect deeply with other humans, and more likely to adopt a more peaceful approach to life and everything in general.
More able to be able to, as we say often, walk in moccasins, walk in the shoes of another person, to have more empathy towards.
To really be able to feel in an embodied sense what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, even though you're not them and you're not in the same circumstances of them, but we can sense that as a part of our expanding sensory perception. And we still have this built-in rejection factor, though. So all the way through from when we first became human and then started to change into what was next, every time we go through a major transformation, we have a strong tendency to reject what's come before. And that's part of our process of gathering energy to be able to make the transition to what's next. So it's an essential part of change in the first tier, and it's playing out on a large scale right now with all of the protests that we're seeing and civil unrest happening all around the world, which is really pushback against the old ways.
Heard this morning that in Lebanon, with the protests there, that they've actually formed a human chain across the whole country at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So and with that sort of protest, and I think also what's going on in Hong Kong, we're seeing perhaps a slightly different approach, as they're trying very hard not to be excessively violent, not to be aggressive, and yet, of course, the pushback is going to bring up in some people that understandable to some degree desire to fight too. So there is that, because of course people in a protest are not all the same. They're not coming from the same place inside themselves, as much as some people may think that. The truth is that we're all different, and one person's response is going to be not someone else's.
It's very true. It depends upon our driving values, where we're at on that spiraling journey of change. And it's, what you say is exactly right. We live in a very complex world, and much of what we talk about on this show is a generalisation, and we need to generalise just to be able to point out these different value sets and what they look like, and also to capture the overall global dynamic. So what's happening globally is a sum of everybody's values and all of the behaviours that go with that. And at the moment, we're moving from a place where the world has been dominated by scientific industrial values, which have been very individually oriented and driven by personal success and impacted by the kind of social systems that have been constructed from that scientific industrial worldview. And we're very much into the change process now, although there's more tension to come before we sort of reach a global tipping point and start to see those relativistic postmodern values dominate globally. We're not there yet. And one of the key signs of that tipping point is going to be the widespread adoption of systems which are designed according to these new values.
Yes.
Socially, yeah.
But as we move towards that, there is a lot of emotional response and reaction to the changes and the instability on the planet in all sorts of directions. It might be in your personal life, or certainly in global terms, or in our societies. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of denial, and those are also indicators, aren't they, of that almost coming towards the bottoming out into the crisis, into the true crisis, before change can really occur.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I did years ago when I was working as a change consultant in Melbourne was realising that the emerging paradigm was reorienting us onto the human experience in an anthropocentric way, and it was also expanding our emotional capacity. I looked at the work of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who did a body of research with terminally ill patients, and she mapped their emotional path, through that change process, from the first shock of realising that they were going to die, which can be equated to any major change in life, although that's perhaps the most extreme change that we have to face as humans. And then how they navigated that terrain of coming to eventually a place of acceptance and being okay, with that outcome. And it maps absolutely onto Claire Graves's map of our change process and how we change, from a values point of view. And the two fit together quite well. So we might take a short break and then come back, and I'll just talk us through how that maps and the emotions of change.
You're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald. Engage, emerge, activate, and spiral up. 9:36 here on BFM on Future Sense through till 11 o'clock this morning. Thanks for joining us, as I said, all around the world. And you can text in at any time, 0437341119. We do have a text today, a bit of obscure, but actually oddly, because it's sort of on the mark, we will be talking about, I guess, words. Why is misspelling the word cool a smart thing? I don't know what that question's about, but I don't know if it's a smart thing or not. Certainly the way we use words is important. That's certainly part of what we're talking about today when it comes to our languaging. And I like to point to the fact that in English, at least, the word spell is exactly that. Words are spells. They are powerful. So the words that you use at all times for yourself, to yourself, in yourself, and certainly to others, and certainly with regard to the world, has an effect. And we'll talk a little bit to that too, because there is science that speaks to the neurophysiology of how we use language and how we use things like gratitude, for example, with ourselves and with each other.
If I say which words are spells, is that a statement or a question? If you know the answer, text in.
Please do. All right. So we're going to look at the change process.
Yeah,
again.
let's look at the change terrain. So, in Claire Graves' research, he mapped out on a graph how we go through change, and it's a paradoxical pattern that he came up with. Before we head in the direction of growth, personal growth, we first of all head in the opposite direction. So it's a paradoxical pattern which is characteristic of all complex systems. Any kind of complex system, particularly complex adaptive systems, always seem to head in the opposite direction first in order to store and gather energy for the change. And that certainly showed up in the process of human change, and particularly the transformation of human values, changing our fundamental way of making sense of reality and giving birth to a new worldview with new values. And so if you think of positive change as going in an up direction and negative change going in a down direction, we sort of flick downwards first before we go up. So it maps out kind of like a roller coaster. And if you look at any complex system change, and some obvious examples are the performance of the stock market and also climate change, you'll see in the graphs these jagged edged changes where the direction is reversed, and it seems to be a process of like pulling back the elastic band on a slingshot. We're storing tension in that elastic band in order to propel us in the other direction. So what Dr. Kubler-Ross found is that when people first face change, and of course she was researching major transformational change, in other words, the news that, okay, you're going to die soon. Yeah. The first result is usually we go into shock. So I guess it's an emotional overwhelm. We feel like we can't cope with actually absorbing that information, and we can go into a place, I guess, of being numb, feeling numb and shocked. We get that physiological shock response in the body, where blood is drawn away from our extremities and pumped towards the vital organs, which is a basic survival response when we go through shock.
And I guess pretty much in this day and age, especially with our communication devices, with the globe being so connected, that many people who are engaged with world issues probably feel shock on a daily basis.
That's certainly a probability, yeah. I mean, if people are tuned into the mainstream media, which tends to be focused on shocking things, I mean, this has been our definition of news, hasn't it? the more shocking it is, then the more newsworthy it is in the mainstream media. And I think that's one reason why a lot of people are moving away from consuming mainstream media.
Yes, and seeking other explanations or alternative ways of seeing the change process, because it is too shocking and it can be very confusing. And of course, there is a great deal of manipulation now, and always was probably, with things like what we now know as fake news, but propaganda generally. So you can be shocked by something, but then very confused by what amount of truth is actually inherent in whatever you're seeing there now. So it becomes even more difficult to actually understand how to respond, I think.
That's very true. And the nature of the scientific industrial mind has been an exploitative one as well. So, people have learnt that if you shock people, then, they become liable for manipulation in certain ways. And it's certainly been used as a tool. And we've spoken about propaganda and the invention of propaganda on the show before.
Yeah. So
that's certainly true. And I was definitely an early adopter in that respect. I stopped watching mainstream TV back in 2003, actually, and don't regret that at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've watched much mainstream TV for probably at least that long myself. I haven't had proper television for a while.
Yeah, and thankfully we live in a world now where we can be mindful about what we choose to consume, and we have choices, particularly through the internet, in terms of what we can tune into and what kind of news services we subscribe to.
And I think it's very interesting to notice as you consume, the word consume I will replace, as you engage with what's going on the planet in whatever way you do, to notice what I've been noticing is what empowers you and what disempowers you. I think this is one question we could throw out there today too, because clearly there's a lot of it that is there in order to disempower you, probably. Perhaps it's a conspiracy, perhaps it's not, but certainly it would seem that's something that is part of the zeitgeist of these times with regards to media in particular.
It is, and I think a lot of it has to do with our sensitivity as well. And what I see from studying Graves' work for years and years and years, and talking to people about it and experiencing myself, I've got no doubt that our sensitivity increases as we evolve, and we become more open, we become more susceptible to tuning into things. And so at the let's say the less complex layers on the spiral, we are quite literally less sensitive in many different ways, and so we're in a way we're more tolerant to these raw, shocking things. They don't impact us as deeply as they would if we have opened ourselves up.
Or if we're not tolerant, we certainly respond in a more simplistic way, you could say, just a sort of knee-jerk reaction to things, and that's enough. That satisfies us and gives us some sort of sense of ego control. I would suggest when you see a story and you go, well, that's that. They're the baddies. They've done wrong, and I know what's right here, and we should be whatever position you're taking in terms of.
And that's related to our changing values. Like for example, in the authoritarian layer 4 on the spiral, which relates to the agricultural era and is still very, very prominent in many different societies around the world, being right or being righteous and living a righteous life is one of the core aspects of our values. And we tend to latch on to a set of rules, often religious rules, but they don't necessarily need to be religious, any kind of rules that are laid down by a higher authority which are attractive to us. And I guess there's some satisfaction that comes when we can prove to ourselves that we are righteous by pointing to somebody who wasn't following those rules and therefore had some unfortunate experience.
Yes. And of course you'll feel connected to your particular tribe with that righteousness, because there'll be those others that support you and that are part of your organisation, your church, for example, who have the same general sense of opinion. So there's a comfortability in that, there's a settling in that into that tribal space.
That's right. And there's a great example of this in the news today. I woke up this morning and checked the headlines briefly, as I do, just to see what's going on, and the US President Donald Trump was tweeting that they had successfully cornered the leader of ISIS, and he had died like a dog. Blew himself up like a coward and like a dog. Yeah, and there was a real sense of that righteousness coming through there, which is also, the people who are living according to those values also are often nationalistic, because nationalism is another form of authoritarianism. Yeah. That's the way you would expect people to behave from that set of values, is that satisfaction that, look, we live a righteous life, our rules are correct, people who don't follow our rules suffer these kinds of consequences.
Yeah. They're dogs, they're cowards and dogs.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. As soon as I read that, it's probably, I don't know this guy, he was ISIS leader, probably a pretty evil man in some context, no doubt that's true, and him going is probably perhaps a benefit to many people out there. That's probably true too. But for the President of the United States to use that sort of language in that sort of way, somehow brings the whole thing down to the same level that they're responding to, if you will.
Yeah, and that's true. And I mean, the whole narrative of evil people versus good people, is a product of a certain set of values.
Are you with us or against us, as George W. Bush used to say?
It also, I mean, again, this sensitivity issue applies here, where we, at that fourth layer, we may have gone through an initial heart opening. However, that the capacity that gives us in an emotional sense is to connect with a first person. So it really needs to be someone that we're in the presence of, and it's still very easily within that values. It's still very easy within that value set to simply write off and shield ourselves to the impact of somebody who we've classed as evil. We put them in a category. They're not here. They're on the other side of the world. It's very, very easy for us to sit back and be smugly satisfied around their death. And it would be a very different experience if Trump had been in the presence of that guy when he blew himself up. I can guarantee. Yeah. The impact would have been far more serious. But and this removal from the consequences of things is also itself a product of the scientific industrial era, where we've separated ourselves from the consequences.
We see this certainly with the drone attacks that are being contested quite a lot by some of those operators now. We've seen a number of people come out and say, well, this was what I did. I found myself in a bunker somewhere in the US, saying, yes, kill these people here, and watching them explode thousands of miles away in one of these countries. And that that disengagement, that detachment is very troubling. And some people are going like, this is not good enough. I've just killed family people, no matter who they are and what they are said to have done. And I don't even know what they've done, really. I'm not even sure that they did those things. How do we know?
Yeah, exactly.
I've just blown them up.
And those confessions, if you want to call them that, are evidence of a transformation of values in those people. Clearly, when they went into that work and started doing that work, that wasn't their value set, but through the experience of doing it, it's opened them up to change.
Indeed. Take a break here on Bay FM. It's 9:48. You are tuned to Future Sense.
Bay FM 99.9. One step ahead of reality as we know it.
It's 9:54 on Future Sense here. Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans through till 11 o'clock this morning.
And we're talking about change dynamics today. We're working towards understanding a second-tier approach of change, and just currently talking through the emotional roller coaster that comes with change. And we're going to get to talking about how that really shifts as we move into second tier. And that, of course, opened up a whole lot of possibilities for working with change differently. So we were just talking about shock being the typical first reaction to sudden, unexpected change. And the next progression from that, once we start to get over the shock, is often to go into a place of denial. So I guess this is fundamentally driven by a fear of change, whatever the change, whatever we think the change might be bringing. Yeah. And often there's a tendency to just want to avoid the change altogether. And whether or not that's possible, often it's not. We can still go into this place of avoidance and denial, pretending that it's not going to happen. We're pretending that we don't have to go through it, don't have to experience it. And I guess there's a lot of that going on at the moment in the world as we progress through this paradigm shift of people avoiding the topic altogether and just pretending that life is going to keep going on as usual for the next couple of decades. And all of these compounding issues that we're facing at a global level just aren't going to stack up and come back to bite us. And this speaks to the importance of our immediate life conditions in the change process, and this is fundamentally why most people in the world are not responding to news of some of these big challenges that we can see coming down the track, is that their day-to-day life conditions haven't really changed much. And it takes that immediate experience of something being different and something creating an evolutionary tension in us to actually get us to change. And this is also why talking about change, even though there are many, many benefits that can come from that, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute, but the process of just talking about change is often not going to create action in other people around change. And of course, we've been seeing that for as long as people have been on Earth, people wanting change, talking about the need for change, but not getting a response from just talking.
Yes, well, someone says here, a quote, which I don't have the source of, it's very simple, it's much easier to be a critic than an agent of change, and we do default there. And I think also when you talk about denial and avoidance, even when we engage with the changes in the world, with the things that need to be done, then because things are so complex, I think also a lot of people find themselves fixating on one explanation for things, one set of this is how it's going to be, this is what we need to do, and in a sense avoid or deny contradictory information because it becomes more complex and more difficult then to find a way to decide what sort of action needs to be taken.
That's right, and you're talking to the next step in the process there, which is confusion. So shock, denial, and then typically confusion, not knowing what to do, feeling overwhelmed, not having the answers, and then grasping at straws to try and make sense, explain to yourself, come to grips with what's happening and perhaps why it's happened.
As I say in the acronym VUCA, which we've mentioned a couple of times, VUCA, vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
Yeah.
Which are really the descriptors of the world we now live in, pretty much.
Yeah, and its confusion zone is perhaps one of the most difficult aspects of the change process, because what's actually happening here is we're being faced with evidence that our previous values, our previous ways of living aren't working.
Yeah.
And they have worked for so long that obviously we've become comfortable. We've found those things to be our anchor points in reality. We can always go back to our values and know that, okay, when I've done this in the past, it's always worked. And all of a sudden now it doesn't work. And it's like we have our anchor points cut away and we drift like a ship that's lost its anchor at sea. And that's very confusing, also very frightening because it implies a lack of control.
And of course we're seeing that with a lot of our young people with regards to the climate change situation. Teenagers who have come out of the streets and all those actions that we've seen in the last few months are compelled by, I guess, all of these. First shock and maybe probably a very quick movement through denial and avoidance to a place of like it's complex, it's confusing, and I have to do something. And there's a lot of sort of aggressive energy, you could say, a lot of anger that arises out of the injustice of things in the world, understandably so, but all part of the process as we move through.
Yeah, and you could say that this movement through change is an unconscious movement. It's being buffeted by the currents, and often I talk about the process of change as being kind of like crossing a river. And if you are not familiar with the river, you don't know where the currents run, say it's a fast-flowing river, then crossing the river is a damn frightening thing, because you know that once you jump into the water, you're committed to whatever the current's going to do to you, but yet you don't know which way the currents are flowing, whether you're going to get sucked under, caught in a whirlpool and stuck or something like that, or maybe smashed against a rock. So this is really a good analogy for the change process. It's like jumping into a river. Once you jump, you're committed. You can't go back. And you've got to go with the flow. And when we don't understand what the currents are, how things are going to flow, then it's a very frightening thing to do. But it's that plunging in, that immersion in the change process, and the loss of our anchor points on the previous bank, which then provide the impetus for us to actually swim. And so in the same way, this is this descent down into a place of crisis and chaos, which is often typified by anger.
Yeah.
So we've gone through shock, denial or avoidance, confusion, and then into typically anger. Or if we're unable to get in touch with our anger and express it, then it can become buried, and so we go into depression. And you're referring to the younger generations, where we're seeing a lot of talk in the media at the moment about that depression that's arising from the climate discussion, which comes from a lack of knowing what to do, a lack of an obvious solution, and I guess a feeling of helplessness, like we can't make a difference at the moment.
Indeed.
And it's in this place at the bottom of the dip, and if you imagine this change journey being a bit like a roller coaster ride where you're going down into a big dip, and at the bottom you're bottoming out, and that's where the tension is maximized. And in the same way as a roller coaster works, as the roller coaster is going down into that dip, it's also storing energy for the rise up the other side, right? So that's exactly what's happening here. It's that evolutionary tension being stored, often expressed as anger. And at the bottom of the dip, it's like the alchemist's furnace. It's like the pot on the stove where things reach a critical temperature. They start to boil. Right. They get transformed. Things merge and change, and that is experienced in our body as changes in our neurochemistry, rewiring of networks, and those sorts of things.
And it has to be burnt right down the alchemical process to dust, basically, to white powder in the sort of proper alchemical transfiguration and trend of. I think the term is calcinadio. That's that part that you're talking about there, the burning down.
Yeah. That's right, and that then leads to the tipping point where, through these transformations that take place within us, we find through insights some new framework for making sense of our reality, and that then gives us a glimpse of new anchor points. And it's not over yet by any means, but we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and this is where the breakthroughs occur in the change process, and we start to rise up the other side of the roller coaster ride. And typically, as we're shooting up the other side, we become aware that, oh shit, we've got all this momentum from coming down into the dip, and now it's pushing us back up. So that's a wonderful relief. It's a very exciting place to be. But we're not through the change process yet. We have to actually ride through that and have some integration process and support to bed down these new changes within us before we reach the rise on the other side of the roller coaster trip.
And of course, there's always the danger at that bottoming out of becoming stuck, and we're seeing in the world, particularly in the Western world, a great increase in various mental health issues, and depression being a very strong one. We see a rise in suicide rates in the first world, in many cases, pretty much across the board, and other serious mental health problems. We see the opioid crisis in America and in this country, and so on as results of that as well. People actually not using that energy, bottoming out, but actually finding that energy stuck in these sort of mental health issues.
Yeah, and we're on one hell of a roller coaster ride as a global community right now. We're navigating a change process that is going to take perhaps decades. My best guesses, I don't pretend to predict the future, but my best guesses to a kind of a global tipping point to the early 2030s. So we've got quite some years ahead of us, and of course different people are going through the change process at different rates and different times globally, depending on their local life conditions. So for many people, they're already experiencing this crisis. For a whole bunch of people, things are fine. Life's comfortable, life's good, and all these people are a bit crazy that are talking about the problems. So over time, everybody's going to, in some way, go through a shift over the next decade plus. And the more we can understand this pattern, the more we can teach people about the terrain that needs to be traversed during the change process, the emotions that we need to experience, and how we go about changing, then the smoother the ride can be for people.
Indeed. Thanks for some of your texts coming in. Thanks for hello, good morning, love the show, keep up the good chat from Ben. And also from D, who's written, and that's a D with a capital D, I'm not sure who that stands for. Empathetic understanding is the grace of the 21st century that will deliver us from the old demonizing blame games of the past. As I tell my daughter, there are no bad people, darling, just sometimes people can do mean things because they are stressed and scared. They are still good, darling. She repeats it back to me and really gets it, because she has not been programmed otherwise, thankfully. Not yet. As Shakespeare said, of course, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah, that's really great. And often those people who we do label as evil or bad are simply people who don't have the capacity to sense and perceive the impact of their actions on other people.
Yeah.
Particularly, in Graves's sort of scale in his model, the third layer, which he called egocentric, is one of the extreme examples of that, where we act very much upon our own needs and wants and desires in the moment, and literally don't have the capacity to really understand how we're impacting other people.
Yeah.
And that the emergence of that capacity to start to sense that is what triggers the transformation into the next layer, of course.
And clearly, when we're looking for world change and some of the big issues, the obvious one like climate change, we have to take into consideration that there are a very large number of people on the planet who simply do not respond in the way that we might respond to these sort of things, and in the way that Steve is talking about, have a completely different perspective and a different way of responding to life.
That's right, yeah.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.